I am known, I wrote a book called The Telephone Assassin, but I do like to reassure people it's not as aggressive as it sounds. I basically do lots of speaking and training and coaching. Some people think it's sales training. I like to think of it more as customer service training. But yeah, it's been a great way to keep me busy. And yeah, it's good to help people find opportunities. And obviously with your audience, finding a client is very much the same as finding a job with regards to how you approach it. So I'm looking forward to sharing how hopefully some of your listeners can put this stuff into practice.
That answer, Anthony. Marketing has always been about word of mouth. Are we getting better or worse with the use of social media on tablets and smartphones?
Oh, it's a tricky question, that one. I think that social media is a great platform for free marketing. It's a way for individuals and businesses to put a message out to a really big audience. And that phrase of remember, things used to go viral. Seems to happen every day now, so it's less something that we talk about as much. But yeah, I think social media can be really useful. I just think that there's a lot of people out there who try and use that platform as a replacement for engaging and talking to actual human beings. They just post out to the general world. So it's a bit more like broadcasting than communicating, I suppose.
And thank you for that answer, Anthony. What is the best way to build rapport in business?
Oh, well, it doesn't matter if it's in business or just in your personal life. There's a few fundamentals, really. I suppose the main thing I usually talk about is good manners. Good manners will really serve you well. So a technique that I often share is how to get permission to speak at the beginning of a conversation, just making sure that now is the time when people are ready to talk and engage, rather than just blurting something down the phone and then waiting for you to take a breath so that they can interrupt and say, can you just send me an email? So using some good manners is always really useful. I suppose in the business context, the way that you can apply that to approaching somebody, if you're starting up a new business or if you're breaking into a new sector, is to make it feel the approach and the conversation. It should feel like you're dropping off a pizza menu. And it's an analogy I give all the time because a lot of us have experienced, we have the takeaway menus put through our letterbox and it lands on our doormat. But none of us really have had them come and knock on the door when they're dropping off these menus and ask to take an order. And I ask people why that is. And they say, well, it would be rude if somebody was to knock on your door on a Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock and ask if you wanted to order pizza. But actually, we're not offended by them dropping off their pizza menu. So it's that approach of creating awareness in your phone call rather than knocking on somebody's door and trying to take an order that I think makes people more receptive to a cold approach. So two things I often say for building rapport is good manners and research. The more information you know about somebody beforehand, the easier it is to flatter them and to tell them why you're interested in them and what else you would like to know about them or what you respect about them. I love phoning people up and saying, hey, John, I've just been on your LinkedIn profile and I can see you've been doing what you've been doing for years, or I can see that you've worked your way up in the business that you work in. I really admire that. And it's a lovely way of showing people that you've taken a specific interest in them. We all have the same favorite topic of conversation, and that is ourselves. The more you know about somebody and the more inquisitive you are, the easier it is to get them talking.
May I ask you, Anthony, what motivated you to want to get businesses talking based on your own personal experience earlier in the business world?
Well, my last proper job, okay, and when I say that, John, I mean the last time I was employed, I used to sell databases to businesses for their marketing campaigns. What I noticed was that many of them would much rather automate and send thousands of emails or do what I would refer to spamming the world in the hope that a few people will respond. And I just encouraged my customers who are buying the information from us, not just to send them an email and add them to a mailing list, but to actually reach out and engage and have a conversation with them. And many of them seemed scared to do so, or arrogant in their approach to it because they were very salesy in the approach that they were taking. So I began to write telesales scripts and just show people how to be polite and interested, and how to engage people into a conversation that they want to talk into. In sales, we hear that phrase that sales is a numbers game, and I do believe that is true, but they often couple it with a phrase which is each no is one step closer to your next yes. And I think that phrase is designed to make you thick-skinned and a bit more resilient. But in my world, I think it's two no's on the trot, and it probably means you're either phoning the wrong people or you're taking the wrong approach. You're coming across in the wrong way. And actually, sometimes you just need to step back. And the permission to speak thing that I mentioned earlier on is a great way to basically capitalize on the conversations people are ready to have, because that's what you want to do. You want to engage with people in a two-way conversation rather than broadcasting at them, I suppose.
Who is a gatekeeper, and what do we have to be wary of gatekeepers?
So gatekeepers, the phrase gatekeeper is usually reserved for that person who answers the telephone in the business but won't let you through. Sometimes they are receptionists. Sometimes you'll find that they're PAs to the decision makers that you're trying to get to. And in different industries, they act a little bit differently. A gatekeeper, in my mind, usually is an access point to get to your decision maker. And my usual rule of thumb is I don't engage too much with gatekeepers. I don't really want to tell them what it is I want to talk about with the person I'm trying to reach, because although many of them want to help, they'll end up probably blocking me. And once they realize what it is I offer and what it is I sell, they're basically going to pass on a diluted version of my pitch. And if they do that to their boss or to the person I'm trying to get to, there's a good chance that person will say, oh, well, actually, if they phone again, just get them to email me. And that's really frustrating, because they then just end up on an emailing list that they don't really want to be on. So what's the point in that? But there are certain industries where gatekeepers are almost not impossible to get past. But if you phone the legal sector, for example, if you phone solicitors, once you say who it is you want to speak to, they'll usually ask what case it is in reference to. And that's purely because the solicitors who work in that firm have KPIs, so their key performance indicators are based around their billable hours. And the gatekeeper wants to know what account are you part of, because this time needs to be billed onto a particular project. And if it's not on the clock, they don't want to take that call. So there are certain industries where it's harder to get past gatekeepers, but typically you'll struggle to get past some of them, but just be patient. You only need to get through once and have one good conversation. So don't waste it by blurting a pitch all over a gatekeeper. It's what I refer to as a premature elaboration, when you're so excited or desperate that whoever answers the phone, you just blurt out whatever pitch it is you have at the back of your mouth.
That's very good advice in terms of managing gatekeepers, because the last thing you want to do, or to have happen, I should say, is for a gatekeeper to have diluted your message to a prospective client. And that makes it very hard for you to go back and build rapport with that person you want to speak to, I should say, in the future. Or the message becomes confused, and it's much more difficult for you then to get your point across a second time.
Absolutely, yeah.
First impressions are so important in the business world. Everybody wants to tell their story. I've interviewed experts on storytelling on previous episodes of the GYFT Show, and they keep saying, tell your story, share your story. Why is it important to share your story in a business context?
I think it's a brilliant question. I think part of what I teach people is part of this sales process. And when it comes to once you've built rapport and you've got people to like you enough to be listening, okay, the middle part of the conversation is around establishing your credibility. Okay, some people would consider this bit the part where you're perfecting your pitch, but I like to think of it as establishing your credibility. And to me, it makes no difference if you're a lawyer or a landscaper. The principles of this work exactly the same. I think you should be sharing success stories that people can relate to. And so what I think you should be doing with regards to storytelling in the business world is talk about the projects and the clients that you've worked with, okay, and then share what they have said about you. Okay, because people are going to believe what your clients say about you far more than what you say about you. So it's really important to get that feedback from clients at the end of projects or when you're starting to refresh your marketing. And if you get an opportunity to ask them, and many you'll find are more than willing to write you some form of feedback, that it may be as a LinkedIn recommendation, it might be a lovely thank you email. In some businesses, you'll want it on TripAdvisor or something like that. They'll quite often be more than happy to share feedback. But when people, I set this as a challenge sometimes in my training to go and speak to one of your past clients and say to them, look, I've been on some training today. They've asked me to reach out to one of my favorite clients to get some feedback so I can share what my customers say about me. And when you do go and ask people, you'll often find that your clients will say, oh yeah, I'm more than happy to write something. What would you like it to say? And it happens about a third of the time. They'll actually ask you, what do you want them to say about you? And I just ask people to share 3 questions, okay, or the answer to 3 questions. The first one was, what was the problem that you had before you started working with me? What was the issue that you had? Okay. Then what was I like to work with? Okay, was I professional? Was I courteous? Was I thorough? What was I like as an individual to work with? And then the third and final thing is, what has happened as a result of working with me? What have the outcomes been? And hopefully they should reflect that they have helped to fix or ease the problems that they talked about at the beginning. So for me, for example, somebody might say, oh, we were struggling to get in front of enough new customers and book fresh appointments. Okay, which is why we engaged Anthony in some training. Okay, then they'll say we were really impressed that he got everybody to fill out pre-workshop questionnaires so he could tailor his workshop to exactly what they wanted. And then they'll usually share a line or 2 of feedback that was given from people in the room, which was like, it was really engaging, it was far more interesting than they thought, or it was far less salesy than they thought, something along those lines. And then the final thing they usually say is, and as a result of it, we're now booking 30% more meetings. We now have 80% of our team hitting their sales target. So sometimes helping people with a structure of how to share the story of working with you is useful. And it just means that you can condense this down into a kind of 1-page mini case study. And that's what you should be going and sharing with people and dropping off like your pizza menu. So, for example, if I wanted to use that in the context of reaching out to you, John, and let's say that we didn't really know each other, but we're both members of the PSA, I might reach out to you at some point once I've got permission to speak. And so say, look, John, I've sent you a copy of my book purely because I've done a few podcasts with some fantastic people in the PSA that I've met. If you're ever looking for a new guest, which I'm assuming you're probably not at the moment, please let me know, because I'd love to have a coffee and a chat about it. And I'll tell you what it is I can do, but I would immediately follow it up with, but I'm assuming you're not looking for this right now, because that's the most common objection, usually in prospecting and in sales, is bad timing. And if you can put that on the table and make it safe to talk about, you tend to find that people will confirm that you are correct and then justify it. They'll usually say something along the lines of, you'll respond and say, well, actually, Anthony, you're right. I've booked all of my speakers for Q1 and Q2. But next month I'll be looking at the next quarter, so perhaps we'll have a chat then. And you might start to give me an indication of when you might be hungry for my services, or it would be more appropriate for us to have a proper chat. So that's how I think is a great way to reach out and share stories, but let your clients speak for you at the same time.
That's a great answer, and thank you for that, Anthony. So to touch back here on, you mentioned the word research. Do you recommend, when you're researching business clients or prospective clients on social media, that you look at their Facebook or Twitter profile in addition to their LinkedIn profile? Because some people might become defensive if you talk to them about personal issues or more lifestyle issues.
Absolutely. There is definitely a line that needs to be drawn in how you use your research, depending on where you get it from. I mentioned earlier on that I would quite often tell people that I'm on their LinkedIn page. And it will be true, because when they look back at who's been looking at them, they'll be able to see that I'm looking at their profile. Quite often I will have looked them up on Facebook as well. It would be very creepy if I phoned somebody up and they'd never sort of spoken to me before, and I just went, "Oh, hi there, I see you've just come back from Turkey on holiday. How was it?" Right? Loving those pictures of you by the pool. Okay, it feels a bit weird and a bit creepy. Okay. However, there can be ways that you can gather information from the more personal platforms and you weave them into the conversation. So, example that I've used a few times is, occasionally you'll look somebody up on Facebook. Well, you'll see them on LinkedIn and they'll look very professional and like a lovely person. Okay. And they are a lovely person, don't get me wrong. When you look them up on Facebook, there'll be a picture of them and they'll be holding their dog in their picture. Okay. And then when you look into their profile and you start to look into some of their photo albums, you'll see that there's lots of pictures of them and their dog. Okay. Now, I can't phone you up, John, and go, "Hey, John, I see you've got 2 spaniels." Okay, to try and break the ice, because unless I work for a vet or a grooming company, you're going to think, "Oh my God, you're a weirdo." Okay. However, if I know that you've got 2 spaniels and you're a real pet or dog person, there is a chance that I might be able to weave that into the conversation and do it subtly. Okay. Probably wouldn't do it on a first call, but on a follow-up call, once I've got my permission to speak, I'd usually say to them, "Oh, how's your day started?" Okay. And it's a very deliberate question. And what most people tend to do is they give you a lazy answer. They'll just go, "Oh, yeah, not too bad. What about you?" They'll give you a really bland answer and then they fire the question back at you. And it's great when they do that, because I can then turn around and go, "Well, actually, it was really nice this morning. I'm actually looking after my mum's dog. And at 6:30 this morning, the sun was coming up. The birds were tweeting. It was a really lovely way to start the day. It was a bit windy, but it was a really nice way to start the day." Okay. And it feels like just an off the cuff type of comment. Now, being a dog person, there's a high chance you're going to go, "Oh, okay. What kind of dog is it?" And I can go, "Oh, well, she's got a long haired German Shepherd. Why? Do you have dogs?" Okay. And then it almost feels like you've now brought up the topic of dogs. Now I can get into it. Okay. And if you like talking about them, you'll go, "Oh, yeah, well, I've got 2 spaniels." And I go, "Oh, really? My sister's got a spaniel. I love them. They're just the right size, perfect for cuddling on the sofa, but not too energetic when it comes to long walks." Okay. And I can make a bit of small talk. So you can kind of weave in information. But there are some instances where, for example, you might see on somebody's Facebook page that they have signed up to run a marathon. They're doing it for charity. I would be tempted to drop that in on a conversation. I'd be saying, "Hey, John, lovely to chat to you. Thanks for taking the time to speak. As I mentioned, I was really impressed when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, at your background. But I was really impressed when I looked a bit closer. And I think on Facebook, I noticed that you're going to be running for charity. So how did that come about? Have you run a marathon before?" Okay. And I would actually put great onus and respect on the fact that you're doing that and show an interest in it. It shows that I've done my research. It proves to you that you're not just a name and a phone number on a list that I'm trying to phone. You're somebody who I've taken a specific interest in. Okay. I might even turn around and go, "I actually I think I saw on Facebook that you're running a marathon for charity. And I've thought about doing that and I'm just not brave enough. What's made you decide to do that?" Yeah. And you might end up telling me a story about how this particular charity has helped somebody close to you, and that's why it is you want to do it. You might say, "Well, I'm massively into running. I want to get fit again." Or my New Year's resolution was to do something. I don't know. It could be anything, but it's just a nice personal touch that shows an interest in them before getting down to business, I suppose. So, yeah, I feel like I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think research is really important. And one of the key things that I often say is, if you're going to take the time to do research, store that information somewhere. Put little links to people's Meet the Team page and their news blog, whatever it may be, their Twitter handle. Put little links in there that next time, because if you phone somebody and they're not around and you don't want to leave a message or you find out they're on holiday for the next week or two, okay, you don't want to waste that 10 minutes you've done researching and forgetting all that information. You want to save it somewhere so that next time, within 90 seconds, I can read back through my notes, go, "Okay, open. I remember John. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Oh, that was the post he did. What was his latest blog? Oh, okay. Let me have a read of that." And all of a sudden, I'm back up to speed. Okay. And I can even phone people up and use a bit of flattery where I could say, "Hey, John, sorry for the random phone call, but I was on LinkedIn earlier and I got to the bottom of your article And that doesn't happen very often with me. I read lots of articles that just bore me, and I thought it was brilliant, and I'm going to share it with some of my clients. I just wondered at some point, I'd love to have a proper chat with you about this, but for now, is it okay if we connect on LinkedIn? And I phone people up to thank them for writing an article and ask to connect with them. And what I found is that nobody's ever said, no, don't connect with me. Pretty much all of them have accepted my invitation within 24 hours. And quite often I get a follow-up phone call in the diary with them where I get to have a proper chat. So yeah, just a few examples of how you can use research, but also be careful and delicate with it at the same time.
You're an expert on building rapport with prospects over the phone. People have cold called me trying to sell to me. I've said no on every occasion. Is there a better way to make calls to prospects that generates a conversation?
Absolutely. What you may find or may have found in the past is a lot of sales calls, you know it's a sales call very early on. They tend to jump in with a huge amount of enthusiasm to tell you all about themselves and their product, and they try and hit you with features and benefits, and it comes across very much as a pitch. It never seems to go down well. And what I always say to people is, if you are going to be prospecting, you need to make it feel like you're dropping off a pizza menu. It is an awareness phone call. I wouldn't be phoning you up to say, hey, John, this is what I do. Do you want to buy it? I would be saying, hey, John, this is what I do. I'm assuming you're probably not looking for this right now. See what you say to that. Because if you turn around and go, no, Anthony, I will never be looking for guests because I've already got these already teed up for the next 3 years. Okay. I then know that there's no future need for my services. We can nip that in the bud nice and quickly. I can move on to the next one. Okay. Or you might turn around and say, actually, Anthony, you're right. I'm not looking for this right now, but I might be at this particular point. Maybe we should have a chat then. Okay. Or if you're really lucky, they turn around and go, funny you should say that. I just had a guest who's dropped out next week. I'm really looking for a replacement. Do you think you might be able to help us? So you've got 3 possible scenarios there. Usually it's the middle one. If you've done your research, you shouldn't find that you're phoning people where there is no future need for your services, or perhaps you're targeting a market that doesn't require the solution that you offer. As you do start to target the right people, like I say, it's all about timing, and the harder we work, the luckier we seem to get. I often think that of 5 people who give me permission to speak and allow me to drop off my pizza menu, at the end of that first call, which is usually only 2, 3, 4 minutes long, I'll be saying to them, okay, John, well, look, I'll email you over this little case study of another podcaster I've worked with recently, so you can see what they say about us. And what I'd usually say is, and at some point, I'd love to offer you perhaps a little test drive if you wanted to do a mini interview, or if you wanted me to do a promo video for what we're going to be doing, or something along those lines that would be useful. Please let me know. Okay. And I might plant that seed of what's going to happen next. And quite often it's positioned as well, why don't you have a test drive? Because to many of us, it means kind of try before you buy. And 4 out of 5 people, when you say, look, well, let me send you a case study, and at some point, let's set you up a test drive, they'll say, okay, yeah, email it over. We'll set up a test drive when it's appropriate. But 1 out of 5 people will turn around and go, well, what do you mean by a test drive? And I get it all the time where people go, what do you mean by a test drive? Does that mean you'll run a free session? Does that mean you'll send me a free copy of your book? And that's where I can turn around and say, well, I'll happily send you a free copy of my book, but there'll be one catch. And the one catch is you've got 1 month to read it and write a review somewhere. As long as you write a review somewhere, post me a little link so I know that it's up there. More than happy for you to have the book free of charge. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay for it. Okay. If people say, would you run a free session for me? Okay. Or I don't know if my team would like you, if we're talking about training, I'll often say, well, why don't we run a mini test drive session? I can share some of my basic or my core material so that they know the structure of how they should be approaching conversations, and I'll troubleshoot their most common objections. Okay. And then I say, would that be useful? And everybody always goes, oh, yes, that would be really useful. I go, well, I tell you what, I'm happy to do that. But because I'm putting it in my diary, it will automatically generate an invoice for £450 for a 45-minute call. However, I will put a caveat on that says, as long as you give me written feedback within 14 days of the session taking place of what happened as a result of using my advice, then you don't have to pay for this invoice. Are you okay with that? And again, I've never had anybody say, no, I'm not happy with that. Okay. It does mean, so I would refer to this as a sort of a value swap. Okay. But it does mean that probably at least 5%, 1 in 20. Okay. I do have to phone on day 14 and go, hey, John, Anthony here. Just had a quick call from my accountant. He wants to double check. Are you still happy to give us feedback today, or are we issuing you that invoice? Okay. And that usually prompts people to go, oh my God, can't believe 2 weeks has gone so quickly. Leave it with me. I'll get it back to you as quick as I can. And although it may not be the best feedback that you'll receive, because it may be slightly rushed in them putting it together, what it stops happening is people coming back and asking for another test drive. Because that's something that if you don't invoice for your test drives, then technically they're just freebies, and free stuff is not always valued. So if you can put a value on it, even if you're discounting it in exchange for something in return, it's a really good way of setting expectations of your fees and stopping people from taking the mickey and coming back and back and back and asking for another little freebie.
We started this conversation with marketing, and in this conversation we've talked about the importance of asking for permission to speak, good manners, the importance of doing research into your prospective clients, and also having good testimonials. Can you tell us in your own words, Anthony, what is the future of marketing?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I suppose marketing, it obviously evolves all the time. More digital marketing becomes part of people's strategies. Some people think that cold calling is dead. I sort of agree with them in the fact that there is no excuse to cold call anymore, because we now can do so much research and gather information before we reach out that it really shouldn't be a totally cold approach. But I've noticed that companies are realizing that service is really what keeps customers. If you're winning business based on price, you'll usually lose it based on price. Somebody else, either that or it's a race to the bottom and you'll be making very little margin. What you tend to find is service. I usually say price will get a deal, but service will win you a customer. And once you can win a customer over and you get their loyalty and you can get them to spend more with you and refer you, that customer becomes worth a lot of money. And I think companies are realizing that customer service is crucial, and that automation is useful, but doesn't necessarily replace the human contact that is often required to make people feel looked after. So I love the fact that I get people phoning me all the time for training, and it really is kind of customer service training. It's just about how to talk to people, how to listen to them, how to ask questions that they hadn't thought to ask themselves, how to squeeze more value out of every conversation that you have. Okay. Like I say, some of this is just telephone etiquette, I suppose. Some of it is around strategy. But to me, I think that the emphasis on communication is being realized, and customer experience is often around the other people in that journey that help us along the way. And like I say, automation has its place. It's very useful for sending paperwork, sending reminders, that kind of thing. But if you have a client that goes quiet on you, sending endless amount of emails might make you feel good and like you've done your job in following them up, but you've merely got it off your desk. You haven't completed the task. So I feel that companies are realizing that although people are and it can be an expensive resource, being able to articulate and converse with customers is the best way of keeping customers happy, identifying issues early on so that you can resolve them, and making sure that customers come back and back and back and spend more and more and refer you more.
I'd like to share some remarkable learnings in this interview today, Anthony. And the first one is, be a gentleman or have good manners on the phone and ask people for permission to speak. Secondly, in terms of business stories, client testimonials trump your own story by a large distance. So be clear in what you're saying about clients in your story. Say, this is the problem the client had, this is the solution I offered them, and this is the outcome after providing that solution. And then finally, service trumps price. Be a customer service focused person, because that's how you win customers and retain customers. As you said, Anthony, pricing can be a race to the bottom. Focus on customer service and providing excellent customer service. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before I let you go?
I know when we've chatted that some of your audience have been made redundant, and it's a really stressful situation to be in. And please do remain active on LinkedIn. If you're listening to this, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're looking for particular types of jobs, let me know. I often know people who are recruiting. But what I talk about often is, I referred to it earlier on as being a test drive. If you're looking to get into a new industry or into a company that you'd really like to work with, be proactive, reach out, tell them why you would like to work with them, and just find out if there's any opportunity to offer some form of work experience, a way that they can find out what you're going to be like if they were to decide to employ you, but also to help you out so that you can get an up-to-date reference on your CV to help you break into that market. And quite often you'll find that when you reach out to people and say, hey, I don't think you guys are recruiting at the moment, but I really want to get into your industry and you're exactly the sort of company I want to work for. Is there an opportunity to do a small amount of work experience in exchange just for a reference for my CV? So I've got an up-to-date thing in this sector. Not many people will turn you down for that. And I even would say to them when they say yes, and maybe if I do well enough, there could even be an opportunity for me internally at the end of it. Who knows? Okay, and it's down to you then to win them over and be worthy of an opportunity there. But I think that being proactive and reaching out shows great initiative, and companies love that. So if there's some company you really want to work for, an industry you want to get into, start reaching out. Ask for opportunities. You'll find that they're in most conversations that we have. We just don't always spot them.
And on that note, I'll bring today's show to an end. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, John.